Hello, hello. Welcome to Royal Resilience. This is Tifla Queen, and I'm back with another video. And I know I am super delayed, but I didn't promise you when I'd be releasing videos. I definitely do it when I feel it in my spirit, and when I have that time. But it is on my agenda. So whenever these thoughts come to mind and I feel like it's the right thing to do, to share publicly, I will definitely do so. So today we're going to talk about the process of grief. I feel like it's an important topic to touch on. Um, I've been kind of noticing just a trend that is very common and similar to pretty much everyone that has gone through any type of loss. And I feel like, why not touch on the subject and educate some people that may not have experienced loss? I mean, I feel like we've all experienced loss to some degree, right? But perhaps you haven't experienced on the same level as someone else near and dear to you. And this is my theory and what I've come up with for loss, right? I feel like there is stages of loss, right? So I feel like there's a stage one, there's a stage two, and there's a stage three of loss. Now on stage, so each level determines the magnitude of what that feeling is when you lose somebody. Each stage determines how long that length of process of grief is going to be for you. Um, that's how I've been able to analyze it and make sense of it by categorizing it in stages. So, and by the way, let me interject. I am wearing a sweater that I just love. It's one of my top favorites. As you can tell, I accidentally got bleach on it and I was so destroyed by it. But it is a sweater by my nephew. My nephew is an awesome, as well, is an entrepreneur in his own right. So he established this sweater and many other awesome t-shirts, but he currently has a new line. It's called Prayed Up Apparel. It's a Christian based streetwear line. So I will definitely be sure to drop the link in my comments, or below. I will definitely drop the link below where you can go ahead and look at his new line of t-shirts that he's created, and he's off to doing wonderful things. And he's a bright young man with a lot of dreams, and it would only be right for him to be my nephew, right? So go get him, guy. Anyway, but back to it. So yeah, so the stages, right? So stage one, I would put everyone that has lost someone that is like super near and dear to their heart. I mean, like your everyday go-to person, right? Your person that you know you live with. And if you don't live with them, you feel like you live with them because you pick up the phone and you call them every single day. They mean something in your life. They are a pivotal person that moves mountains in your life. So that could be your mother, your father, it could be your spouse, it could be your right hand man, like your best friend, your work partner, right? Those are people that you end up having like soul connections with. Um, Sometimes they're your twin flames. It doesn't have to be your spouse to be a twin flame or a soulmate, right? Your best friend can definitely be your soulmate. Um, whether you're intimate with that person or it's just just a friendship. It's just a straight up friendship, right? And stage two are those people that you love with all your heart, but you may not speak to them every day. You may not speak to them every day. You may only see them on occasions or holidays, or um, you speak to them, you know, a, every 2 weeks or once a month or every quarter of the year, whatever it may be, right? You don't speak to them every single day, but your heart, in your heart, they're special to you. And then there's the stage three where it's like they're it's everybody. It's like the friend of the friend, or the person that you know of or you worked with, but you didn't have this great relationship, but you were associates, and you knew each other through the grapevine somehow, some way. So, and so my point of it is, each one of those stages, the grief is going to feel more stronger. It's going to take you more time to move through that grief. So the topic I'm touching on, that rings a little more dear to my heart, is stage one. So if you don't know, and you're just now tuning in, I lost my husband, which was my long time good friend, turned best friend. Well, best friend, best friend turned good friend, turned best friend again, and then lover, and then husband. Right? I lost him 3.5 years ago, and it was the worst cycle of my life. I feel um, the worst and good, if I can say that, if that's allowed for me to say without being offensive. It was worse because I lost myself completely. I was the most out of body, out of in tuned, out of in touch and aligned of who I was and my purpose in this life. Um, I realized that I had been leaning on him, um, as a guide, as a leader, as a coach, um, my manager in business. I had really, really become so codependent on him that I didn't know how to move or operate without him. And losing him was the most scariest thing in my entire life. And so in that times, that first, few months to a year of being without him, my natural thing was to run towards whatever seemed similar, to him, where I felt like, okay, you feel safe because you're similar as him, or you know, you've been um, around and a part of this journey. So I ran to what felt comfortable for me in that moment. And whether it was right or wrong, I feel like I was not understood, not understood in that time span of me being the most vulnerable I've ever been in my life. Um, so, but where it was good is because although I became so lost and distorted in who I was, um, it forced me to find myself, to really do the work to find myself, right? So when you're so lost, you have no other choice but to um desire to be found. If your heart is intact, if your heart is intact and you have the strength, you have no other desire than to be found, right? So I did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of soul searching, digging to really find out who Tiff was. So that was the goodness about it, is that I found out who I was in my pureness. And I was able to really reflect on the child, the the child in me, where all of my wounds were and what they were about, and things that happened to me, and understanding them and learning to forgive, and learning to not just forgive others, but to forgive myself, right? Because I'm not perfect. Um, so that was the good in it. But if I want to kind of pinpoint on one particular thing in the process of grief, is that the reality is, if you're experiencing a stage 1 loss, more than likely it's going to take you about 2 to 3 years to fully get over the hump of that loss. And even after that 2-3 year mark, you're still going to have some moments that may pop up, that where you feel it, on certain days, where you're like, and you reminisce about it, so that's normal, right? Especially if you're like myself and you're left behind with a child from that spouse. You wake up every morning and you look at that child and you see your spouse and that child, so you're reminded of that person each day. um, but yeah, so it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to fully process. That's the reality of it. And what I realized in my time, from now being at the 3.5 mark and witnessing others lose people that are near and dear to their heart, and experiencing stage 1 level of grief, um, what is so common is that people have the tendency to rush in the very moment of that loss, right? Because that's what we're programmed to do, is to rush in that moment of loss and be there to comfort that person, because that's the traumatic moment for that person. So yeah, we need to be there for that person, but we don't understand that once we rush in, we all rush in. So you have that trauma of the loss, then we rush in, right? So now we're comforting that person and we're being there for that person, creating somewhat of a barrier or a band-aid, for the pain or the wound, that the person has experienced from the loss, right? But then what do we all do after days after the loss has happened? We all rush out. Now we pull the band-aid off, and now that wound is exposed. Now this is a stage 1 wound, right? This is not a paper cut. This isn't, you stubbed your toe on the corner of the bed. This is a major wound. This is, life support. This is major, right? So we rush out before this person has fully recovered, right? So now not only has that person experienced trauma from the loss, now that person is experiencing an additional trauma from the loss of all of those that have rushed in and then rushed out. So it's leaves that person not only trying to process the grief from whoever they lost, on stage 1. Now they're also trying to process the grief of losing everyone else around them. And that's a tough place to be. So that is why it typically leaves someone where it takes years to recover from a stage 1 loss. Whereas if you're sitting on one of the lower levels, it's much easier to process the grief because you're not dealing with the intensity of what stage 1 brings. It's like a hurricane, right? So I feel like as people, we have to, just do better, be more aware of that in the process of one's grief. Because although you may be strong, one may be strong and process grief, and they might have a smile on their face and they might want to go out and hang out and party. Or other people process it and they want to be alone and they want to like pull away. And I was that person. I needed that time by myself, but I had those that I was also comfortable with and I ran to. And that first period of my grief. And but to be, if I'm speaking on my experience and what I've experienced with others that have processed stage 1, we need the most love more than likely in our year 2 of processing grief. So this entire video is to say, if you know anyone that has lost someone near and dear to their heart, do random things, send them a card in the mail, send out a message, just not to be nosy or nothing, just say, thinking about you, love you. Do things without asking. You know what I mean? There's ways of being able to do things with people on a whim, for people on a whim, without asking to do it. I've been that person where I've just committed to doing something without asking that person, hey, I want to do this for you because I see a need and I would love to do it. I'm not asking you for permission. I know it's something that you need. So I'm going to come by and I'm just going to go do it for you. Without no expectation, no wants or desires behind it. I've been that person. I've been that person to do it. It's easy. We got to be kind to people in this life. And if we're capable to, without draining ourselves, because that's another thing. That's why I kind of like pulled away from being that person, is because you can't drain yourself. In order to help anyone else, you have to first help yourself. You have to first make sure that you're okay before you can ever provide for somebody else. Right? So pour into yourself first. And then if you can, and it's possible, do things for others without asking, because more than likely that person might be a person that doesn't like to take from anybody, and they may turn you down and the answer will be no. So just do. I love y'all. Take care.